While most people view generational wealth as a sum of assets on a balance sheet, the true barrier to entry is a legacy of psychological scarcity inherited from the Maxwell House tin in the back of the cabinet. You are currently operating under an invisible ceiling constructed by your history and habits, where a $12 fee was once a crisis and ambition was treated as a liability. To move from level 1 to true financial sovereignty, you must recognize that your current trajectory is not a reflection of your potential, but a byproduct of a map that no longer matches the terrain. Think about the Maxwell House tin. It was tucked away in the shadows of the high cabinet over the fridge, that red lid keeping a stash of emergency bills sealed tight. Your grandmother didn't put it there because she had some conspiracy theory about the banking system. She used that tin because she didn't trust her own hands to leave the money alone if it stayed visible in her wallet. That cash was a prisoner of her own anxiety. It never moved, it never gathered interest, and it certainly never worked for her. It just sat there like a ticking time bomb in reverse, waiting for a disaster to justify its existence. Have you ever realized that this single, dusty image of stagnant cash is actually the cornerstone of your entire financial philosophy? Nobody ever pulled you aside to give you a lecture on the mechanics of being broke. There wasn't a textbook handed out in middle school titled Why You Are Destined to Struggle for Every Cent. It was much more subtle than that, wasn't it? It was the heavy silence that filled the room when your father shut down any talk of retirement. It was the way your mother's face would go rigid and her jaw would clench tight the second the family car emitted a cough or a sputter that didn't sound right. You were breathing in a curriculum of scarcity every single day without even realizing it. You learned that for people like us, money isn't a tool for growth, it's a source of deep-seated embarrassment. Remember the time you had to lose that school trip permission slip because the $12 fee happened to fall on the wrong week of the month? Or how you managed to turn wearing the same 3 shirts every single week into a curated personal brand just to hide the fact that there wasn't a fourth. You became an expert at reading the room. You stopped asking for things not because your parents were mean, but because seeing the heartbreak and stress wash over their faces when you wanted something was a price you weren't willing to pay. That look taught you a dangerous lesson. Wanting more is a threat to the peace. It taught you that ambition is a luxury for other people, and your job was to simply be thankful for the crumbs you already had. You hit that invisible barrier and just stopped growing because that's the script everyone around you was following. But eventually, you start to feel this persistent, buzzing restlessness in your bones. It's like trying to navigate a high-tech city using a hand-drawn map from the 19th century. Nothing lines up. You start to suspect that the rules you were taught are real, sure, but they aren't universal. Then comes the crack. It might happen when you're 17 or maybe 22, but suddenly you're sitting in a break room or staring at a laptop at midnight, and a realization hits you like a brick through a window. You see people who started exactly where you are, but they simply decided to stop believing in the ceiling. That single thought is the most violent thing that can happen to your worldview. It's the moment you decide to tear up the contract you were born into, and while it's the ultimate liberation, it's also the start of a grueling, decade-long fight to unlearn everything. What do you think happens when you finally decide to stop playing by those old rules? Here's what nobody tells you about the moment you decide to opt out of the script you were handed. Entering this new space doesn't feel like some triumphant movie sequence where the music swells and you suddenly feel powerful. It feels like walking into a thick fog where the floor has simply vanished. It is pure vertigo. You have effectively stepped off the side of a skyscraper, and you are currently suspended in that terrifying half-second where you don't know if you are about to find a hidden platform or if there is just 500 stories of empty air beneath your feet. To cope, you start diving into data and research like a person possessed, but you do it in total secrecy. You keep your mouth shut because you have seen how the tribe reacts to outliers. Look at what happened to your cousin just 2 years ago when he tried to launch that company. The family tag him as delusional every single day until the moment he finally threw in the towel. And then, suddenly, they called him brilliant for having the common sense to quit. It is as if your social circle has a biological defense mechanism, an efficient immune system that detects the virus of ambition and immediately moves to neutralize the foreign body before it can spread. So, you hide. You wear your headphones like armor, watching tutorials in the dark and scribbling into notebooks that you hide under the bed. You are constructing an entirely separate reality inside your skull, and the distance between that mental kingdom and your actual, gritty life is becoming so vast that everything is starting to feel like a dream. But then you actually do it. You pull the trigger on your first venture. Maybe it crashes and burns in 7 days, or maybe it just limps along like a wounded animal for 6 months before it finally gives up the ghost. Honestly, the outcome doesn't matter yet. What matters is the raw data of your actions. By merely attempting the feat, you have physically removed yourself from the 90% of the population who live in the land of I should have, or I almost did it, or I had this great idea once. You have officially separated from the pack. But you need to understand that this distance isn't free. You haven't seen the bill yet, but trust me, the invoice is already in the mail. Now you have entered level 3, the invisible, soul-crushing grind. You are 2 years deep, maybe 3, and your balance sheet is a flat line. This is the dark matter of the financial world. It exists everywhere, but you will never see it on a LinkedIn feed or in one of those How I Made My First Million highlight reels. The gurus skip this phase because the reality of the middle game is ugly. It is agonizingly slow, and it simply doesn't convert into clicks or core sales. This is the stage where you are hit with a type of fatigue that a full night of sleep can't touch. You are performing the same task for the 100th time, watching it fail for the 100th time, while your old friends are out there living restful, predictable lives. Eventually, the invites to the bar or the weekend trip stop coming. It is not that they hate you, they just got tired of hearing no, so they stopped asking. You tell yourself that this isolation is just the cost of doing business, but choosing to pay a price doesn't make the payment hurt any less. Then the pressure starts coming from inside the house. Your family starts asking those pointed, sharp questions about when this little project is going to turn into something real. They aren't trying to sabotage you, they are just terrified on your behalf, and when people get scared, they get impatient. It hits a breaking point when your mother offers to give you cash, money you know for a fact she doesn't actually have. That kindness feels like a lead weight. You take a massive financial hit, watching months of disciplined savings vanish into a failed experiment, and you are forced to stare at that specific, humiliating number on the screen. It keeps you awake for an entire week. Finally, you hit that 3 a.m. moment where the mission doesn't just feel hard, it feels genuinely idiotic. The voice in your head, which sounds exactly like every skeptic you have ever met, becomes the most logical person in the room. It whispers that nobody from your neighborhood has ever pulled this off. What do you think? Is it possible that the voice is actually right? Look at the metrics and tell me that is just a coincidence. It is not. That is hard, actionable data. When you finally stand back up after a hit, it is not because you were gifted some secret, high-performance mindset or because you are made of superior material. You stand up because you have fundamentally destroyed the bridge behind you. You have essentially scorched the earth of your old existence. There is no going back to the version of you that simply accepted a life under the glass. Because of that, your personality starts to crystallize. You become a bit more stoic, a bit more reserved. You realize there are specific, intimate conversations you used to have with the people you love that you just do not initiate anymore. It is not that you have stopped caring, but the chasm between the concepts in your head and the things they would actually comprehend has become too vast to bridge over a single dinner. This type of isolation does not hit you like a thunderclap. It settles in slowly, quietly, like silt at the bottom of a river. But then, something shifts. You hit level 4, the first sign. It is not the flashy, 7-figure exit you see in the highlight reels. Not even close. But it is tangible. It is yours. And nothing in your history could have prepared you for the electricity of that feeling. Maybe it is that specific month where your side income finally covers your rent, or that surreal moment when a total stranger pays you for something you built from scratch. Perhaps you stare at a bank balance that, just 2 years ago, you would have dismissed as a glitch or a typo. It usually lands on a boring, ordinary Tuesday. You stare at that screen for an uncomfortably long time, then you just close the laptop and go to sleep. Why? Because there is nobody to call. The one person you really want to share the win with would not even understand what that specific number represents. They do not have the context of the thousands of hours that built it. Explaining the victory would mean explaining your entire life, and you just do not have the stamina for that tonight. What actually changes in this moment? For the first time, you do not just believe the ceiling is breakable, you know it in your very marrow. It is the profound difference between reading a textbook about mountain climbing and feeling the bite of thin, frozen air in your actual lungs. But here is the catch. What gets worse? The stakes. Suddenly, the game is real, which means you actually have something to lose. Your fear evolves. You are no longer scared that you will never make it. You are terrified that you will make it and then watch it all vanish. You become protective to the point of being paranoid. You stop posting updates. You stop talking about your wins. You keep the light away from the project until it is sturdy enough to survive being scrutinized by the public. Every single cent gets reinvested. You force yourself to stay in that zone of discomfort because you have learned the hard way that comfort is the graveyard of momentum. This first win is not your destination. It is just the confirmation that your internal compass is finally pointing north. Keep going. We are moving to level 5, the crossing. The number becomes real on a Wednesday. You probably think hitting $1 million feels like a fireworks display, but for most of us, it happens on a boring, unremarkable Wednesday. You are sitting in your car or at your kitchen table, or maybe at that high-end desk you finally splurged on, and you run the calculations for the 100th time. Then, suddenly, the math finally clicks. 7 figures. For the first time in history, that specific number is legally anchored to your name and the Social Security number on your tax returns. You check the screen, kill the app, and then reopen it immediately just to make sure the digits didn't evaporate. You expected this to feel like you finally crossed a marathon finish line or like a weight was lifted off your chest, but it is actually just quiet. It is a disorienting, hollow silence. You are effectively standing in a house where someone has hauled away every piece of furniture, and there is no echo of anyone who came before you. Your parents literally do not have a word in their vocabulary for what you have just become. There is no historical reference for this milestone in your family bloodline. Have you ever tried to explain a complex truth to someone you love, only to realize the bridge isn't long enough? You pick up the phone and dial your mother. You guys talk for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. You never even bring up the $1 million. It is not about being secretive. It is that you have no idea how to say it without it sounding like you are gloating or, worse, like you are abandoning her. It feels like you are standing on opposite banks of a massive, rushing canyon, and you are terrified that if you shout the news, the sound of the water will just get louder. So you just tell her you are doing fine. She tells you to make sure you eat a real meal instead of grabbing fast food. You hang up and sit in that vacuum for an hour. Here is the reality check. That money fixes every old struggle you ever had, but it immediately uncovers a terrifying new layer of problems you didn't know existed. Suddenly, you are drowning in talk of tax structures, asset protection strategies, and complex investment vehicles. You grew up with a coffee can above the fridge, remember? There was no instruction manual for any of this. Reaching 7 figures isn't the graduation. It is the first day of an even more brutal education. You start to realize that while you are still from that same neighborhood, you are fundamentally no longer the person who lived there. Carrying those two identities at once creates a friction that costs more than the 3-year grind ever did. This brings us to level 6, the gap. You go home for the holidays and the sensory data hits you like a brick. It is the same house, with that same specific scent in the drywall that you only notice now that you have been gone. The TV is still cranked up way too loud. The dining table is still wobbling, stabilized by that same folded napkin tucked under one leg. Everything is exactly as you left it, which is exactly why the divide feels so massive. And yet, there's a gap now. Not between you and the people in this house. Distance has a funny way of acting like a magnifying glass for the heart. You probably find yourself loving the people back home with a much sharper intensity than you did when you were stuck in the same room with them. But the reality is that the life you used to lead and the one you are building now are beginning to vibrate at completely different frequencies. You can feel the discrepancy deep in your chest, similar to that sudden, popping sensation in your ears when a plane begins a rapid descent. It is an atmospheric shift that nobody mentions out loud, but everyone in the room senses. Think about that moment at dinner when the check arrives. You slide your card across the table and tell them it is handled. They offer a half-hearted protest that you did not need to do that, and you insist that you truly wanted to. What follows is a microstutter in the conversation, a tiny, airless pocket of silence that lasts just a second too long to be natural. No one brings it up, and the meal continues, but the tectonic plates of your social world have just shifted a few inches further apart. Have you noticed how you are losing people who haven't actually gone anywhere yet? It is the strangest phenomenon in this financial journey. There are no explosive arguments or dramatic goodbye letters. Instead, it is a slow-motion drift, like two vessels that were once moored to the same dock, but now someone is slowly letting out the slack on the line, inch by painstaking inch. By the time you look back over the railing, the shoreline where you both started has faded into a grey smudge on the horizon. Your oldest friends start acting like they are walking on eggshells. Some get uncharacteristically quiet, while others get louder and more aggressive, constantly poking at you to see if the old, recognizable version of you is still hiding under the expensive watch. I remember one specific dinner where a childhood friend cracked a joke that was supposed to be funny, but it was dripping with a very specific kind of toxic resentment. You did not call him out, and he did not say sorry, but that was the day the phone call started getting shorter. Relationships often crumble simply because you decided to stop making yourself small to fit into the room. It is a harsh truth that partnerships usually buckle when one person starts climbing and the other is content to stay at base camp. You begin to lose the people who were only attracted to the version of you that needed to be rescued. They do not know how to interact with someone who is self-sufficient. You end up grieving these exits in total silence because there is no way to post about it on social media without sounding like a pretentious jerk. The isolation of winning is a mirror image of the isolation of losing. In both scenarios, you are sitting in a quiet room wondering if anyone actually sees the real you. Then there is the heavy lifting of the guilt, the one thing the gurus never put in the brochure. It is not some abstract concept. It is the gut punch of watching your mother stress over a utility bill when you know you could wire her enough to retire tomorrow. But you hesitate because you know that writing that check might permanently damage the dignity of the woman who raised you. You are dealing with the guilt of growing up, the guilt of outrunning a fate you were supposed to share, and the guilt of surviving a system that was designed to keep you down. You carry this mental baggage like a heavy rucksack on a long hike. You eventually get used to the straps digging into your shoulders, so you just keep walking. This is the reality of level 7, the weight. You finally have the power to say yes to all the things you spent decades rejecting. You can finally close your eyes at night without that constant, low-frequency hum of financial panic that has been the soundtrack of your life since you were a kid. You can say yes to things you spent years saying no to. You can go to sleep without the background radiation of financial. True empowerment isn't found in a self-help quote or a positive intention. It is found in the cold, hard utility of capital. Actual resources are the only things that possess the teeth to bite through a legacy of struggle and create a fundamental shift in reality. By securing these assets, you have granted your children a launchpad that shares no DNA with the one you inherited. This single achievement validates every brutal year of the grind, every crushing financial loss, and every one of those 3 a.m. moments where you stared at the ceiling in terror. Every sacrifice was a payment for this new reality. That part of the story is absolutely real. But here is the catch that the lifestyle influencers ignore. The freedom you bought comes with a gravity that no amount of success can ever fully cancel out. You are the first one across the line. That means you are moving through a wilderness where there is no pre-existing map. No one in your family can offer a single word of guidance on how to carry this weight, how to protect it, or how to ensure it doesn't evaporate the moment you are gone. Wealth is a biological dead end that stops at one generation unless you develop the complex architecture required to funnel it into the future. But remember, nobody ever sat you down to teach you how to be an architect. You are essentially forced to draft the blueprints while you are already living inside the structure you are building. You think about your kids constantly, or the ones you plan to have. You want to wrap them in a blanket of security, yet you are terrified of that security turning into a gilded prison. You have seen it happen. The kind of comfort that deletes all friction, kills the hunger, and erases any comprehension of what things actually cost. Your mission is to give them a massive foundation without dousing the internal fire that makes a person formidable. You do not have the answer key for that yet. You are just solving the puzzle in real time, just like you figured out how to survive the streets you came from. Your family looks at you through a different lens now. You see that genuine, chest-swelling pride in their eyes, and it hits you hard every single time. It is a beautiful thing. But underneath that pride, there is a subtle, unrequested shift in the power dynamic that nobody actually wanted. It happened the same way all the big changes happened, quietly and without an announcement. Suddenly, you have become the emergency contact for everything. It is not just about the money. They are calling you for advice, for final decisions, for every looming problem. You have been drafted into the role of the ultimate authority. It feels like a strange gift, but it also feels like an impossible weight because, inside your own head, you are still just figuring yourself out. You are still a rookie at this level. You just happen to look like a pillar of stability from the outside. In those rare, silent windows of the early morning before the world starts making demands, you can hear yourself think. There is a sensation there that does not have a simple name. It isn't regret, it isn't the sting of loneliness, and it certainly isn't just simple pride. It is a dense, quiet pressure. It is the weight of being the one who actually made it out. You are looking at a family tree that finally stopped bending under a specific kind of ancestral pressure the moment it reached your branch. Everything you execute now will echo forward through lives that haven't even begun yet. Your grandchildren will inherit more than just a portfolio. They will inherit the entire shape of what they believe is possible. You have fundamentally redrawn the dimensions of their ceiling and the size of the dream they are allowed to imagine. The era of the coffee can is officially over. In its place, you have established accounts with balances your grandmother could not have fathomed, legal structures your father never knew were real, and life options your mother was never supposed to possess. You did not just cross a finish line, you took the line and moved it miles down the road. You carry that knowledge every day now. It is not a burden you want to put down, but a massive responsibility you wouldn't trade for anything. Because being the first means you didn't just break the glass for yourself, you deleted the ceiling for everyone who follows. They will never even know it was there. They will look up at the open sky and just assume that is how the world has always looked. Unlimited. Obvious. Free. They will never know about the years you spent staring at the underside of a barrier most people in your family never even thought to question. They won't know about the 3 a.m. moments, the failed experiments, or the specific isolation of hitting a milestone that had no reference point back home. So, you hide. You wear your headphones like armor, watching tutorials in the dark and scribbling into notebooks that you hide under the bed. You are constructing an entirely separate reality inside your skull, and the distance between that mental kingdom and your actual, gritty life is becoming so vast that everything is starting to feel like a dream. But then you actually do it. You pull the trigger on your first venture. Maybe it crashes and burns in 7 days, or maybe it just limps along like a wounded animal for 6 months before it finally gives up the ghost. Honestly, the outcome doesn't matter yet. What matters is the raw data of your actions. By merely attempting the feat, you have physically removed yourself from the 90% of the population who live in the land of I should have, or I almost did it, or I had this great idea once. You have officially separated from the pack. But you need to understand that this distance isn't free. You haven't seen the bill yet, but trust me, the invoice is already in the mail. The era of the coffee can is officially over. In its place, you have established accounts with balances your grandmother could not have fathomed, legal structures your father never knew were real, and life options your mother was never supposed to possess. You did not just cross a finish line, you took the line and moved it miles down the road. You carry that knowledge every day now. It is not a burden you want to put down, but a massive responsibility you wouldn't trade for anything. Because being the first means you didn't just break the glass for yourself, you deleted the ceiling for everyone who follows. They will never even know it was there. They will look up at the open sky and just assume that is how the world has always looked. Unlimited. Obvious. Free. They will never know about the years you spent staring at the underside of a barrier most people in your family never even thought to question. They won't know about the 3 a.m. moments, the failed experiments, or the specific isolation of hitting a milestone that had no reference point back home. And that is exactly how it should be. That is the entire point of this journey. You did not do this for a plastic trophy or to hear them say you were right. You did this so the next person in your bloodline doesn't have to start at the bottom of the well. That is the true definition of generational wealth. It isn't a figure on a spreadsheet. It is a brand new starting line. You built it out of pure nothing. You built it out of a red Maxwell House lid and a clenched jaw and a family that loved you even when they only knew how to build walls. You took that invisible ceiling and you turned it into the floor everyone else gets to stand on. The view from this height is nothing like the pictures. It is heavier, it is quieter, and it is far more real. But you wouldn't trade this for any version of an easier life. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next.